Praise God, Bohinde! God bless you, Carl.
Now, you see, Father, Master got us working on Sunday. I just want to know who go to hell for it.
I think you'll be okay.
Good.
Tula, would you join us in Holy Communion?
I'm no longer interested in anything your God has for me.
When hip-hop started, it's Latino and black.
Hip-hop, we created just us. We ain't see you in the back of the bus. Black and brown, what? Nah, you ain't fuck with us. Outside, watch ride, yeah, get in touch. Watch from the sideline, cosplaying us. Till them cops roll up, pistols off the bus. Wear your homeland clothes while you dressing like us. Till your money grow up, now you holding nuts. Everybody wanna play us, till it's really time to be us. Fleeing niggas, feet in the dust. Funeral procession, just us. Reparations, cash payment, baby, just us. Who you think built this shit, just us? You was in your homeland, you was getting fucked. We was shedding blood fighting here, just us. How you think you got here, nigga, just us? Caribbeans and Africans, you ain't doing much. Ain't nobody hating FBA, we doing us. They be doing us, you be doing us. Now you talking like you the ones who made it up. Nigga, we special, got the guy like touch. People wanna dance, even vibe like us. Till it's time to stand up and die like us. Ain't nobody story who survived like us. We are Americans, we are inheritors, ancestors' children. The land of the slave, ever brave architect, we built the buildings. When they speak of the scriptures, yeah, we are the children. FBA all day, remember the blood that they spilled. Rock and roll country music, just us. The very first cowboys, nigga, look it up. Rewrite history, they wanna type it up. Flood us with these immigrants, they wanna white it up. Colonizer rap, who control the image, huh? Ain't no message in the music, so we get stuck. So if it's stuck, then it's stuck. When you play with devils, then you end up like Puff. Brother, ain't no love, you become a porn fluff. Now you do the biddings of the ones who broke you up. We call it bug breaking, you the one that's played the buck. Nigga, you a cuck, if it cracks like a duck, then nigga, it's a duck. Funeral procession, just us. Reparations, cash payment, baby, just us. Who you think built this shit? Just us. You was in your homeland, you was getting fucked. We was shedding blood fighting shit, just us. How you think you get here, nigga, just us. Caribbeans and Africans, you ain't doing much. Ain't nobody hating FBA, we doing us. They be doing us, you be doing us. Now they talking like you the ones who made it up. Nigga, we special, got the God-like touch. People wanna dance, even vibe like us. We are Americans, we are inheritors, ancestors' children. Land of the slave, ever brave architect, we built the buildings. When they speak of the scriptures, yeah, we are the children. FBA all day, remember the blood that is spilled.
Oh, there won't be no more. I can let you hammer rain. Oh, there.
Fuck your butt.
I like that.
What's up? What's up? What's up? Welcome, everybody. Welcome to the broadcast. Shout out to everybody in the chat room. I hope you all are having a great day. Big shout out to Chuwe Igwe, my man JJ Diesel, Cowboy Monks, Traveler 79, Glow Hardy, everybody in the Rich Mob. Big shout out to all my members, man. Devin Townsend, big shout out to you. Pooh Man 313. Who else we got up in? Make sure you represent where you're from. Make sure you represent your town, man. I want to make sure we salute to all y'all. Now, as you guys know, my name is Dennis Spurling, also known as Uncle D, the Blizzard King. I'm an attorney. I'm a business owner. I'm a father, homeowner, ... et cetera, et cetera. I have long, deep roots here in the United States amongst my family. You know, for the most part, I've seen the cycles. I've heard the stories about our experience here in the United States. So it's extensive, more so than a lot of folks who are of immigrant descent. Now, ironically, I recently found out that I have some Caribbean descent, and I wrote about that extensively in my books. And I would implore you to read that, because I think a lot of Black Americans will find that. Nevertheless, as we are, and here we are today, we have begin to delineate ourselves, foundational Black Americans, from immigrants and Africans and so on and so forth. And another thing that we're beginning to do is we're beginning to pick our political parties. So, and of course, we are divided amongst the two major American parties, and that's the Democrats and the Republicans. And this being a very heated election season, I wanted to point out something. Now, the title of this broadcast today is "The Black Conservative Extremists or Extremists Are on Their Way Out." And here's the thing. There was a time when being a conservative, or even calling yourself a Republican was unusual. And I'm talking about recent time, but that's no longer the case. The Black conservative movement is growing rapidly within the Black community. Some of the most well-known Black conservatives today include Supreme Court Justice Clarence Thomas. We have several Republicans here, or conservatives here on YouTube: Officer Brandon Tate, or Tatum, the Hodge twins, back to the politics, the Larry Elder, and then of course you have figures like Jason Whitlock and Allen West, Sheriff David Clark of Milwaukee, Stacey Dash, and on the extreme end, you have figures like Myron Gaines, Candace Owens, Jesse Lee Peterson, Tommy Sotomayor, and I would think this young man is very little known, but his name is Sneeko. Most of you all have heard of them. And to be frank with you all, and I think we all can agree to this, we you know, I disagree with certain conservative, or should I say this, I agree with certain conservative principles, but I, like many of you, don't align myself with the Republican Party, and definitely not the far right. That kind of inconsistency is something that we'll never accept. Additionally, I find many of today's Black conservatives to be quite disappointing. And it seems as if anyone who turns against their own community can call themselves a conservative these days. All they need to do is continuously criticize Black Americans, and they'll attract an audience that rewards them for repeating harmful, racist ideas. This seems to be the easiest and most opportunistic path for those looking to make a name for themselves. And over time, they start to believe their own words, and they convince themselves that the white survivalists they serve actually respect them. However, the truth is that no one trusts or respects someone who betrays their own people. Now, some of the strongest defenders of white supremacy are people who are not even classified as white and who refer to themselves as Black conservatives. Many of them openly support white supremacist ideas, or are at the very least sympathetic to them. They either actively enforce these harmful systems or silently support those who do, while constantly spreading anti-foundational Black American rhetoric. They have built an entire careers around attacking Black people with hostility and aggression. You can recognize these extremists by the way they speak. They have no problem supporting far-right policies. They defend killings of black people like Trayvon Martin and George Floyd. And they'll even justify murders and often spread false information, such as claiming that George Floyd died from a drug overdose, despite the fact that the medical examiner confirmed that Floyd was killed when that white supremacist police officer knelt on his neck for over 9 minutes. These so-called black conservatives are really extremists. They're black conservative extremists, and they promote a harmful ideology that denies the existence of systematic racism and undermines the struggle of their own community, our community. Rather than addressing real issues, they choose to align themselves with those who perpetuate oppression. Now, we shouldn't confuse the plain conservative, I would say, with these far-right, racist, black extremist conservatives. And when I say plain conservative, or when I say black conservative extremist, a black conservative extremist is an individual of African descent who aligns themselves with far-right ideologies, often to the detriment of their own community, and advocates for conservative values in a way that harshly criticizes and alienates foundational Black Americans, aka FBA. Somebody type FBA in the chat room. Now, unlike traditional Black conservatives who may hold conservative values while still advocating for the interests of our community, Black conservative extremists exploit their racial identity to serve predominantly white conservative agendas, often promoting divisive, harmful narratives that undermine the struggles and progress of Black Americans. Here are some key characteristics, okay, of the Black conservative extremists. They align with white supremacist agendas, okay? And these type of individuals, they act as mouthpieces for the far right or white supremacist ideologies, amplifying anti-Black rhetoric and promoting policies that disproportionately harm our community. They're used as tools to provide legitimacy to these harmful agendas, but are ultimately discarded when their utility is exhausted. Okay? Often, these Black conservative extremists come from immigrant backgrounds, or their personal histories that disconnect them from shared historical experiences of foundational Black Americans, such as slavery, Jim Crow, and systematic racism. And they can also be biracial. And because of this disconnect, it allows them to criticize FBAs without understanding or empathizing with their struggles. Now, they have harsh criticism for Black community. Black conservative extremists frequently attack foundational Black Americans, accusing them of victimhood or laziness, while ignoring the systematic barriers and the historical context that continue to impact the Black community. This rhetoric aligns with white supremacist talking points, and it serves to undermine the fight for racial equality and justice. Now, I've said this before, they are really temporary tools for the far right. And these people often become prominent voices in conservative spaces, but they're used as temporary tools to advance specific agendas. And once the novelty wears off of their messages, or should I say, their messages are no longer serve the conservative interest, they're quickly discarded. And then at that point, they face rejection from both the far right circles they served and the Black community that they alienated. Now, what happens after they get alienated from the Black community through their divisive rhetoric, and because they align themselves with groups that don't genuinely care for our well-being? These Black conservative extremists often find themselves isolated, rejected both politically, culturally, and unable to return to the community. They betrayed and abandoned our community. And then they turned around and were betrayed and abandoned by the far right once their usefulness is over. See, these Black conservative extremists leverage their racial identity to shield themselves from criticism and lend credibility to the far right. However, their advocacy often lacks a genuine understanding or concern for the historical and ongoing struggles of Black Americans, making them pawns in a larger anti-Black agenda. Now, some figures, some individuals, figures like Candace Owens, Myron Gaines, Jesse Lee Peterson, they exemplified Black conservative extremism. They utilize their platforms to promote harmful stereotypes about the Black community, aligning themselves with white supremacist narratives and conservative agendas that seek to undermine racial progress. These people are lauded by the far right circles. And as long as they advance their narratives, they're fine. But again, as I said, they ultimately face rejection over as their value diminishes. Now, here's the thing, and shout out to my man Billy X. IMO Black Extremists are tools and are looking for views and a payday. Thanks, Frat. 06. Now, here's the thing. These Black conservative extremists represent a dangerous intersection of racial identity and far-right ideology. Their alignment with white supremacist agendas, their detachment from FBA experiences and divisive rhetoric against us and our community make them temporary tools in the broader anti-Black political framework. Ultimately, their betrayal of the Black community leads to cultural exile, political irrelevance, and once they're no longer useful to the far-right movements they serve, poof, be gone. Okay? Now, again, I want to reemphasize that there is a distinction between these Black conservatives and the Black conservative extremists. Now, I asked you all a question on my YouTube page, my community tab. I asked you all to list all of the Black conservatives that you could think of, and you all put together a list for me. Okay? Some of them I had heard of them, some of them I hadn't heard of them at all. But they fall into two categories for the most part. Okay. And that doesn't mean that some of these Black conservatives don't say extremist things, but for the most part, they're just your typical run-of-the-mill Black conservatives, as opposed to the Black conservative extremists. And it lies primarily in the way you can distinguish them is that it lies primarily in their approach and their rhetoric and the extent to which they engage with political and social issues. While both groups share foundational conservative values such as support for free markets, personal responsibility, law and order, and traditional social structures, the manner in which they promote these values and their treatment of opposing views differs significantly. So the Black conservatives, such as Supreme Court Justice Clarence Thomas, the brother here on YouTube, Officer Brandon Tatum, the Hodge twins, two light-skinned dudes, I think they're from Virginia or something like that. Larry Elder, Jason Woodlock, Allen West, Sheriff David A. Clark, Stacey Dash, they adhere to conservative principles, but generally maintain a more measured and pragmatic approach in their public discourse. These folks advocate for policies that emphasize self-reliance, limited government intervention, economic freedom, and respect for law enforcement. Let's say, for instance, Clarence Thomas. As a Supreme Court justice, he's known for his commitment to originalism and constitutional conservatism. And his conservative philosophy shapes his rulings on key legal issues, but he largely remains reserved in his public statements, preferring to influence through his judicial opinions rather than polarizing rhetoric. Somebody type polarizing rhetoric in the chat room. Okay? These are keys. I want y'all to listen. Shout out to everybody in the chat room. You guys make sure I need 19 more super chats. In fact, what I'm going to do now, since y'all a little slow with the super chats, I'm going to go ahead and put the subscribers only on. Subscribers only. So if you haven't subscribed to the channel, you won't be able to comment. Subscribers only. So if you haven't subscribed to the channel, let's go ahead and do that now. All right, subscribers only. So if you haven't subscribed, you need to go ahead and subscribe. It's going to be a hot one. I know you want to be heard, but you need to subscribe to the channel. So we talked about Clarence Thomas. What about another famous one like Larry Elder? He's a radio host and a politician, and he emphasizes economic freedom, education reform, individual empowerment as a path to improving the lives of African Americans. And while his views often challenge mainstream liberal ideologies, his approach is typically focused on policy solutions rather than inflammatory language. Somebody type inflammatory language. So we got polarizing language, we got inflammatory language, right? And then what about these two light-skinned dudes? The Hodge twins, right? and Officer Tatum. Now, these personal, should I say, these social media personalities, they're vocal in their defense of law enforcement and conservative values, and their opposition to movements like Black Lives Matter. They're very vocal, right? However, their messaging, while strong, is often rooted in dialogue that seeks to persuade through humor and reasoned arguments rather than extreme attacks. Recently, there was a young woman who was shot in her kitchen. And I believe there was a commenter on there who said something to one of the Hodge twins. And he said, yeah, man, you know, he didn't like the shooting. And he said that wasn't right. And he said that could have been my mama, you see? And that lets me know his rhetoric is genuine. He really believes that, okay? And it wasn't extreme at all. So again, we're talking about Black conservatives versus the Black conservative extremists. Even Allen West and Sheriff David Clark, all right? Both West and the former congressman and Clark, a former sheriff, advocate for strong law enforcement, patriotism, and constitutional rights. They're critical of progressive policies, but they maintain a level of professionalism in their discourse, focusing on governance and public safety. These are all Black conservatives, but they're not extremists. And there's a place in the Black community for Black conservatism, okay? Now, and some of the ideas I think many of us share that. And shout out to Ivy Dreams. A big shout out to my AKA shout out to the pretty girls with the pearls. You know what I'm talking about? Anyway. But let's get back to it. So now let's contrast that with the Black conservative extremists, okay? Black conservative extremists like Tommy Sotomayor, Sneeko, Myron Gaines, Candace Owens, and Jesse Lee Peterson. You guys know them, right? And they take a much more provocative and confrontational approach to their conservative views. They often engage in extreme rhetoric that demonizes not only opposing viewpoints, but entire communities, especially the Black community. And they do this in an effort to appeal to sensationalism and to gain attention. Candace Owens is known for her abrasive commentary. Candace Owens regularly attacks movements like Black Lives Matter, often employing inflammatory language, and she focuses heavily on discrediting systematic racism, and she tends to frame her arguments in a way that aligns with far-right talking points, often causing division within the Black community. And when we look at Tommy Sotomayor and his commentary, okay, it often ventures into the extreme territory, particularly in his discussions about race and gender. And his content is known for being particularly controversial and confrontational, with a focus on criticizing Black culture in ways that many view as degrading and disrespectful. Somebody type degrading and disrespectful in the chat room. And when we look at these YouTube people like Sneeko and Myron Gaines, these social media influencers are primarily associated with the manosphere, the white manosphere, and conservative ideas surrounding masculinity and relationships. They often take these views to extremes, advocating for hyper-aggressive personal responsibility and dismissing the impact of systematic inequality, which leads to a reductive view of social issues. Look at, and then, and then you got Jesse Lee Peterson. He's in a category all his own, isn't he? He's known for his extreme takes on race, gender, and politics. He often dismisses claims of systematic racism and blames African Americans for their own struggles in ways that lack empathy or nuance, making him a polarizing figure, even within conservative circles. So the key difference, you guys with me? I need 19 more super chats. The key difference between Black conservatives and Black conservative extremists. Black conservatives tend to use respectful, policy-driven rhetoric that invites debate and persuasion. They often engage in dialogue to argue for conservative principles while acknowledging differing opinions. Black conservative extremists, on the other hand, employ inflammatory language, and they often alienate people with others with harsh and sometimes demeaning commentary. And they tend to attack people or groups, specifically Black folks, rather than engage in substantive poly discussions. So the one thing is the rhetoric and the tone. The next thing is the treatment of the Black community. Black conservatives, they may critique aspects of Black culture or liberal policies that they see as harmful, but they often do so with the intention of encouraging growth and reform or self-improvement within the community, whereas Black conservative extremists are more likely to dismiss or even denigrate the Black community as a whole. And their extreme rhetoric can border on self-hatred or a desire to curry favor with the far-right audiences by vilifying the Black community to an exaggerated degree. Okay? The other thing is the approach to opponents. Black conservatives typically challenge opposing viewpoints with arguments rooted in ideology and logic, and they seek to change minds through reasoned debate. Black conservative extremists often demonize opponents, portraying them as not only wrong, but morally deficient or unworthy of engagement. And their aim is frequently to provoke rather than persuade. Now, the other thing is the platform usage. Black conservatives use their platforms to promote conservative policies, to advocate for economic empowerment, and to call for reform in areas like education and criminal justice. And they tend to focus on issues rather than sensationalizing their opinions. Whereas Black conservative extremists, use their platforms to generate controversy and attention, often focusing on more performative outrage, right, and divisive rhetoric rather than meaningful solutions. And so they're frequently accused of pandering to a predominantly white far-right audience by amplifying anti-Black narratives. In short, what I'm saying is that these folks, especially these Black conservatives, these people who adhere to these conservative values, they're a little bit more thoughtful, right? Policy-based discussions aimed at improving the communities and the country at large. And they seek to balance critique with a desire for progress. Black conservative, the extremists, on the other hand, thrive on provocation, using extreme language to attack the Black community and anyone who disagrees with them. And their motivation often appears to be more about generating attention and money rather than fostering constructive dialogue or enacting meaningful change. Okay, that's what I see. Now, the financial aspect of it, I want to talk about that because it's big money in talking bad about black people. But before I do, I'm gonna take a quick break, y'all. I'll be right back. Y'all make sure I need 19 more super chats.
I want to see you win. And I put pressure on us men to understand how we did not get our masculinity training. And we've been doing our work, okay? But now it's time for you ladies to understand you're going to have to bet on us like you want us to bet on you. I talked to several men this week. I don't just get on here and talk shit. I have men I call around the world and I ask, what do you think about this concept? Level set me. Shout out to brother Dennis Spurling. Dennis, I'm not gonna I don't want to tell people's business, but I'm gonna tell you, high value men retire their women or make them come work for them. So ladies, what is it going to take for you to free yourself? Because you and I both know you're dying at these jobs. You're in a toxic.
All right, welcome back to the broadcast. If you guys appreciate these high-level conversations, man, make sure you hit the number 1 button. As you guys know, the only people that can comment today are subscribers. So if you want to comment, you got to subscribe to the channel. I'll wait. If you want to comment, you got to subscribe to the channel. If you haven't subscribed to the channel by now, and you're just watching for free, oh well, too bad for you. Okay, so you need to subscribe to the channel or you will be silenced. And also, big shout out to Billy X. I'm gonna need 19 more super chats. Uncle D don't work for free. Okay, now we are talking about black conservative extremists and how they're on their way out. But I also want to explain to you more so on the lines of the financial motivation. As I said before, it's a lot of money, okay, to feed these notions, these racist notions of white supremacy. It's a lot of money to be made. Shout out to Isaiah's Flowers. Thank you so much. Appreciate that cash out or that super chat. We're gonna need 18 more super chats. Y'all make sure y'all make that happen. 18 more super chats at some point. I don't see any cash apps yet, but the cash app is rolling across the bottom of the screen. We'll get back to this in a minute. Uncle D has to check his messages. But yeah, so again, like I said, it's a lot of money in talking reckless about foundational Black Americans, okay? And what I find is that my observation is that Black conservatives in general, the extremists, I should say, they operate under the assumption that their affiliations with these white think tanks and conservative organizations provide them with a form of immunity from criticism, particularly when they challenge or attack revered ideologies, okay? And this sense of protection seems, or should I say, it stems from the rhetorical advantage they gain by having spent years aggressively attacking movements associated with Black people, okay? What does that mean? They think they have some political cover in the bank, okay? And also because they denounce Black people by oftentimes perpetuating a number of falsehoods. People like Sneeko, Myron Gaines, Candace Owens, Jesse Lee Peterson, Tommy Sotomayor, okay? Others in the same ideological sphere have been elevated by influential anti-Black organizations and movements. And this leads to the question of why do these extremists eventually turn on those who have supported and promoted them? And the answer doesn't seem to stem from any principled stand. Instead, as is often the case with such opportunities, it comes down to money. Somebody type money in the chat room. See, when the financial incentives dry up, these folks are quick to shift their allegiances. They take their services, whether ideological or rhetorical, wherever the financial rewards are greater. And these extremists are always ready to change direction when it benefits them. And this behavior exposes their true motivation, that is profit. If the right-wing benefactors who once supported them offered more money, okay, there's little doubt that these Black conservative extremists will retract any previous criticism, or at least they would tone down their rhetoric to align with the interests of those paying them. In reality, they're not guided by ideology or principle. They're simply mercenaries in the world of political discourse. Their loyalty is not to ideas, but to whoever is willing to pay them the most. And with enough financial incentive, they'll gladly say whatever is required, serving as mouthpieces for anyone willing to write the check. Somebody type cut the check in the chat room. And they lack true conviction. Their actions are dictated by the relentless pursuit of personal gain, even if it means betraying the very communities or causes they once claimed to represent. Now, on the flip side, you also have liberal extremists. Just as there are Black conservative extremists, there's also Black liberal extremists who hold significant influence in media and political discourse. Figures like Roland Martin, D.L. Hughley, Ricky Smiley, Charlemagne the God, Joy Reid, Sonny Hostin, Mark Lamont Hill. They can be seen as representing the side of the ideological, that liberal side of the ideological spectrum. And while they often advocate for progressive and liberal policies, they sometimes push their views in a manner that could be considered extreme, using their platforms to promote narratives that may oversimplify complex social, political issues or vilify those who disagree with them. Look how they have vilified the Black community. Look how these so-called liberals, these Blacks, these extreme liberals, have vilified Black people who dare to even suggest that they're going to vote for Donald Trump. Look at that. We can talk about Roland Martin. What's up, frat? Yeah, Roland Martin is my fraternity brother. But that does not make him above reproach when it comes to criticizing his extreme political rhetoric to the detriment of the greater good of Black America, because I'm a Black man first. And when I see that he uses his platform for certain things, now I get it. I do appreciate him aggressively calling out systematic racism, right? And I'm happy that he advocates for policies aimed at addressing historical inequalities. And his message resonates with many. But his approach can be criticized for being divisive, particularly when he dismisses or harshly condemns Black folks who align with conservative or moderate viewpoints. Similarly, D.L. Hughley and Ricky Smiley, both are comedians and commentators. And they're known for their vocal critiques of not just conservative politics, but anyone who questions progressive agendas. Look at how D.L. Hughley just came out the box and attacked Janet Jackson. Somebody type Janet Jackson in the chat room. Somebody type Janet Jackson at the top, Miss Jackson if you're nasty. Huh? Somebody type control. Don't. Control. How can you attack an icon like that? But Kamala Harris, a woman that most of us didn't even know who she was 6 or 7 years ago. But you attack a Black American icon, and you have the nerve to try to talk about her physical features, commenting on her nose. That's extreme. Very extreme. They oversimplify or frame issues within rigid ideological boundaries, these two. Now, another person is a couple of people. We can talk about Charlemagne the God, Joy Reid, and Sonny Halston. And they've garnered attention for their no-holds-barred approach to discuss race, politics, and social justice. They also can sometimes fall into extreme rhetoric, particularly when engaging in polarizing debates over identity politics. Joy Reid, in particular, has been accused of using her platform at MSNBC to promote narratives that paint opponents of her views, whether on race or social policy, as morally, intellectually deficient. Basically, she calling you dumb if you disagree with her. That's extreme. And this kind of extreme polarization can alienate segments of the Black community that do not align entirely with the liberal ideologies. Mark Lamont Hill, another one of my frat brothers, another prominent voice. He's made headlines for his staunch positions on racial and international issues, and his strong advocacy for Palestinian rights, for instance, led to his dismissal from CNN, and his commentary on race often ventures into extreme territory, particularly when he critiques the U.S. government or calls out those within the Black community who do not support his viewpoints. And while his passion for justice is undeniable, some of his critics argue that his approach is too radical and sometimes inflammatory. So you have Black liberal extremists who, like their Black conservative extremist counterparts, often operate within echo chambers where dissenting opinions are labeled as traitorous or ignorant. They frame their narratives around the idea that their perspectives are the only authentic or legitimate representation of Black thought. That's it. And this binary approach can be just as limiting and problematic as the extremes on the conservative side. Both Black liberal conservative extremists tend to create an us versus them mentality, which can be counterproductive to nuanced, inclusive dialogue by labeling opponents as enemies or sellouts. And they often contribute to the deepening divisions within the Black community and American society at large. Look, we appreciate the Roland Martins and the D.L. Hugleys and the Joy Reids because they play a critical role in advancing discussions about racial justice and equality. But sometimes their rhetoric is extreme and it mirrors the behaviors of the Black conservatives, extremists. Because you got both sides who push ideologies in ways that polarize and oversimplify rather than fostering the kind of nuanced, multifaceted discourse necessary to address complex social issues. Now, here's the thing. Y'all still with me, or this is over your head? Let me know. Hit the number 1 button if you're with me. If you're still with me, hit the number 1 button. If you're still with me, hit the number 1 button. Let me know. We out here on some masterclass stuff, and it's about to get a little deeper. We're about to go a little deeper. Because see, now, somebody type nothing new in the chat room. Somebody type nothing new in the chat room. Did you know that back in the day, most Black people voted Republican? Somebody type nothing new in the chat room. Somebody type nothing new in the chat room. See, the alignment of African American interests with the Republican Party is part of a long-standing historical pattern that emerges in the 19th and the earlier 20th centuries. See, during that period, the Republican Party was perceived as a champion of emancipation and civil rights, making it the natural political home for many African Americans. However, it's important to understand that the broader political context of the time. The Democratic Party, especially in the South, was aligned with the interests of white supremacy and segregation. And that made it impossible for any thoughtful Black American to support that party that actively worked against their rights and interests. Now, there were some key elections during that era that illustrate this alignment with the Republican Party. The election of 1868 for president. Ulysses S. Grant, he received strong support from the African-American voters, particularly in the South, due to his backing of the Reconstruction policies. There was another one, the presidential election of 1872. Grant once again benefited from African-American votes, with the Republican Party still seen as a protector of the newly gained civil rights. In 1880, James Garfield earned the loyalty of Black folks who continued to see the Republican Party as their defender. 1896, there was some division within the Black community, but many still supported William McKinley as a Republican Party, stood against the Democrat Party, which was aligned with white supremacy. And then we can go on to 1900. McKinley retained the Black vote, which reflected an ongoing loyalty to the Republican Party's legacy of emancipation. Now, Black people's support for the Republican Party began to weaken in the 1920s. And although many still voted for the Republican Party, particularly in the North, due to its historical connection with civil rights. But at that time, the political climate began to shift dramatically during the 1930s, triggered by the economic opportunities presented by Franklin D. Roosevelt in the New Deal. Somebody type New Deal in the chat room. And here's the other thing. The Democrat Party, like the modern day Republican Party, has began a slow pivot away from the Southern segregationist and its roots. See, African Americans start to reconsider their political loyalties. And key moments during the Civil Rights Movement further accelerated this realignment, leading to a significant shift in voting patterns towards the Democrat Party. Okay? So several prominent political leaders played a pivotal role in encouraging this shift. Listen, W.B. Du Bois, you heard of him. He argued that the Democrat Party, particularly through the New Deal, could offer better economic opportunities and civil rights protections, urging African Americans to engage politically to combat systematic racism. I want you to understand something. At that time, the Democrat Party was seen as the racist party. It's no different than how the Republican Party is seen as the racist party. And of course, W.B. Du Bois called backlash from that. Can you imagine that? You want us to support the people who wanted to put us back into slavery? And we got people alive right now who were in slavery. And here you got W.B. Du Bois, this educated man. What y'all call him, boule, snooty? You want us to support them people? Can you imagine those conversations at the barbershop? Think about that. It's a very similar climate to what we have right now, where you have Black conservatives, not the extremists, but conservatives trying to convince Black people to vote Republican. They're catching the same flack that W.D. Bois was catching. Are y'all starting to see it now? See, history doesn't repeat itself, but it has an echo. And we're seeing an echo right now. Okay? There's other people, names you may have heard of, like A. Philip Randolph. And for the most part, he was focused on labor rights and racial equality. But Brother Randolph believed that the Democrat Party could be could better serve the economic and social needs of African Americans. Ain't that what they saying right now about the Republican Party? And y'all saying, but they racist though. They a bunch of racists. That's what y'all are saying, right? Hey, Ray, how you want us to vote for the racist, Philip A. Randolph? You understand what I'm saying? You see? Mary Cloud. So you know these people's name, but you don't know why they're famous. Mary McLeod Bethune. She was an advocate for education and employment. And Sister Bethune worked closely with the Democrat Party during the New Deal. And she served as an advisor for President Roosevelt on policies to improve Black lives. She was the original Black Lives Matter. We got a school named after her, Bethune-Cookman, HBCU named after her. You see, this is why these people were famous. Now, again, they were considered Democrats. They weren't extremists, they were just Democrats. They tried to convince black people to vote Democrat. Same way you got some black people trying to convince you to vote Republican. Because they think it's better for you. Are y'all with me? Here's another one, a name I know very well, Charles Houston. Charles Houston, he was a civil rights lawyer. And he saw the Democrat Party as a vehicle for challenging segregation and promoting legal reforms. Okay, imagine how difficult it was for him. You a lawyer, and you out here trying to get us to vote for them racist Democrats? No. I bet it's affected his business. Right? But these people were brave. Keep that. I want you to, y'all with me. This plane should be landed, got the wheels on the tarmac soon. What about James Weldon Johnson? Have you heard of him? He was an NAACP leader, and he advocated for voting rights, suggested aligning with the Democrat Party to achieve civil rights goals. Okay? So you got organizational people, you got community activists, you got lawyers, you got teachers. Here's another name, Oscar DePriest. He's the first black congressman from the North. DePriest encouraged black voters to engage with Democratic Party as a means of advocating for social justice. And these leaders faced a very difficult task of trying to convince black people to shift their allegiance from the Republican Party which had long been seen as the party of emancipation, right? And over time, particularly with the New Deal and civil rights movement, the transition gained momentum. So this is not new. Somebody type "not new" in the chat room. We shift parties about every 100 years, apparently, black folks. Okay? But the thing you have to understand is in today's political climate, with more black people identifying as conservative, the novelty of black conservatism has worn off. Somebody type "worn off" in the chat room. And as this visibility grows, black conservatives, particularly those who lean toward the extreme rhetoric, somebody type "extreme." Somebody could type Jesse Lee Peterson in the chat room. Somebody type Candace Owens in the chat room. Somebody type Myron Gaines in the chat room. Somebody type Sneeko in the chat room. Okay? So, as I said, those who lean more towards the extreme rhetoric are more likely to face criticism and lose popularity. And this shift can be understood within the broader political cycle. Historically, white supremacy uses people, black people, as tools for its agenda, but it discards them once they're no longer useful. Black conservative extremists who align themselves with white supremacist narratives will eventually be rejected by these groups, as white supremacy has no enduring loyalty to those who serve it. Furthermore, These black conservative extremists who have built their careers by attacking the black community and spreading black anti-black rhetoric, they're going to find it nearly impossible to reintegrate into the black community because they've alienated themselves through this harsh criticism and betrayal. And they're not going to be accepted back. And in the end, they risk becoming isolated, rejected by both white supremacist groups that they once courted and the black community they turned their backs on. Now, historically speaking, the response of African Americans to leaders advocating for a shift toward the Democratic Party, it varied widely. And it reflected a complex landscape of opinions and sentiments. And here are some key points. There was, of course, skepticism, and there were people who were loyal to the Democrat Party. I need 8. Look, you guys want me to keep talking? I need 18 more super chats. We're an hour in. I got 2. 2 won't do. 20 would be plenty. So I need 18 more, or I'm gonna go. So y'all look, bars, right? Somebody type bars in the chat room. Don't be cheap with Uncle D. Now, that said, many black folks were initially skeptical of the Democrat Party, as they should do, because of the historical association with Jim Crow laws and the segregated South. And this skepticism was rooted in long-standing loyalty. It was long-standing loyalty to the Republican Party, which had been seen as the party of emancipation and civil rights. Now, as the Great Depression unfolded, somebody typed broke in the chat room. Somebody typed we broke in the chat room. As the Great Depression unfolded, some black folks began to appreciate the benefits they got from the New Deal. These programs initiated by Franklin Roosevelt and leaders like Mary McLeod Bethune and Philip Randolph highlighted how these democratic policies could address economic disparities, and that led to an increased support for the Democrats among some large segments of the black community. People like W.B. Du Bois and James Weldon Johnson, they encouraged political engagement, and that resonated with many African Americans because they wanted their voice to be heard. And this led to a gradual increase in voter registration and participation in the political process, particularly in the urban areas. You see, because remember, at this time, black folks had moved from the South and they moved to the North. Okay, now, that said, the black community was not monolithic, and responses varied based on factors such as geography, class, personal experiences, right? For some folk, it just would be impossible for them to vote for a Democrat because the Democrat was aligned with the political party that had kept them oppressed when they lived in the South. And even if they were in Detroit and Chicago, whatever, they couldn't vote for the Democrat Party. Just impossible to do. And some people you're just not going to be able to change. Okay. Now, efforts of leaders advocating for Democratic support were framed within the broader civil rights movement, and many blacks resonated with cause of equality and justice, leading to a growing recognition that the political alliances could help facilitate that process. Shout out to my man Timothy Humphrey. Thank you for the super sticker. I need 17 more super chats. Now, over time, civil rights leaders demonstrated the capacity of the Democrat Party to enact meaningful change. They gave us something. Somebody typed tangibles in the chat room. Somebody typed tangibles in the chat room. Somebody typed tangibles in the chat room. They gave us something. We shifted from the Republican Party, which gave us something, to the Democratic Party, which gave us something. As of late, the Democrat Party is not willing to give us anything other than lip service and identity politics. So they're not willing to give us any tangibles anymore. And so we're saying, hey, We're going to go over here to the Republican Party. So what are we going to get if we stay or if we go? But at the end of the day, the Democrats gave us those civil rights bills and laws. They gave us part of that New Deal. You see? They gave us meaningful change to help better our lives. So more black people began to embrace the Democrat Party. Events such as the March on Washington, the Civil Rights Act of 1964, it solidified that shift. Overall, while there was initial resistance and skepticism to vote Democrat, the advocacy of the leaders promoting the Democratic support gradually influenced many black folks, especially the Democrat Party, and they began to adopt pro-civil rights stances in the mid-20th century. And the transition was complex and multifaceted, and it reflected a diverse experience and aspiration within the American community. Now, here's the thing. Shout out to my man Hannibal. I ain't seen you in a long time. Big shout out to Hannibal. Shout out to Hybrid 711 and shout out to Trey the Banger. Thank you so much. I appreciate all you guys. I need 13 more super chats. Now, what's the harsh realities? What was the backlash? Somebody type backlash. Somebody type backlash in the chat room. Shout out to Rodney E. Somebody type backlash in the chat room. See, the response of many black folks to fellow black leaders who are advocating for the support of the Democrat Party, it's a bad taste in your mouth. You understand? Particularly during the 19th century and the earlier 20th century, when the party had a significant ties to white supremacy, just like these Republicans. These modern day Republicans. Because remember, I'm explaining to you that originally the Republican Party was the party of black folks and freedom. And so these black leaders had to endure a lot of intense criticism and skepticism. Okay, there was deep distrust. Many black Americans viewed the Democrat Party and their black agents, shout out to Timothy Humphrey. They viewed them with distrust, especially due to, he said Lyndon B. Johnson wasn't wrong when he said, I'll have N-words voting Democrat for the next 200 years. Yeah, but they gave us something. And it didn't last 200 years. It lasted how long? About 75. What are we looking at? About 60? He was off a little bit. Okay? But again, we talk about deep distrust. You've convinced these black folks to vote for, or trying to convince them to vote for the party that has ties to segregation and Jim Crow. And this skepticism extended to black leaders who encourage voting Democratic, leading to accusations of betrayal and naivete, just like they saying about these black folks who are voting Republican. Somebody write Trump 2024 in the chat room. Where are all my Trumpites at? Somebody type Black MAGA in the chat room. Somebody type Trump 2024 in the chat room. You're going to get something out of here. So we're on a historical political cycle right now, where black folks are saying the Democrat Party stopped giving us tangibles. Now we're going to go somewhere else until we get tangibles. That's what's happened. It's happened before. It happened again. Now, what do you see happening then? What's happening then is happening now. There's accusations of compromise. Some black people, some black activists and community members, you accusing these Democrat Party. This is what was happening back then. They accused the Democratic Party on principles of compromising, on principles of racial equality. They said, hey, if you guys, if we stop voting for the Democrat Party or the Republican Party, that's dangerous. The shift could undermine our hard-won gains that we got from the Republican Party. In other words, if we abandon them, they might reverse these policies. They'll do it anyway. It also created divisions within the community. The push for the Democratic support created significant divisions within the Black community. Leaders advocating for this shift, they faced backlash from those who felt that aligning with a party associated with racism was not only misguided, but also harmful to the struggle of civil rights. Now, we still talk about the 1930s and 40s, right? We might as well be talking about now. If I change Democrat Party to Republican Party, we'll be talking about right now. Again, we're on a cyclic political shift right now. And then, of course, you have those many Black people who call for unity against systematic racism. Shout out to Cool Lee. They said, how are you against systematic racism, but you've softened your stance against the Democrat Party, who's historically been aligned with white supremacy? They were basically calling them sellouts. They were basically saying y'all paid off. They're saying you betrayed the struggle for equality. Same thing you all are saying about these Black MAGA folk. Y'all been bought, isn't that what they say? Right? This is what we're dealing with right now. See, the brutal reality of racial violence and oppression made Black folks wary of any political party that did not clearly prioritize civil rights. In this context, heightened the scrutiny of Black leaders who encouraged support for the Democrats who had been aligned with segregation and Jim Crow because they felt like the stakes were seen as life and death. Are you guys starting to see the trend here? Fear? Are you all starting to see it yet? Fear and tangibles. Fear and tangibles. Many Black folks felt that advocating for the Democratic Party distracted from more pressing issues like economic equality, access to education, and the immediate civil rights struggles. And this led to frustration with leaders who seemed to prioritize party loyalty over tangible outcomes for the community. Let me run that back. Party loyalty over tangible outcomes for Black people. That's what you see the liberals doing. That's what you see people like Charlemagne the God and Roland Martin doing. Vote for Kamala Harris. Vote blue no matter who. They're telling you party loyalty over tangible outcomes for the community. Black folks want cheaper gas. We want these immigrants to be sent home. And you telling us to vote blue for no matter who? We're not going to put party loyalty over the tangible benefits that we receive. Now, what happened then? How did the Democrat Party begin to get Black folks to vote? Well, they began to change their stance on civil rights. And some of these divisions eased. The same thing you see the Republicans doing. They changing their stance on certain rights that affect Black folks. But still, the legacy of skepticism and harsh criticism still lingers. It still lingered. And the transition for the Democrats, for Black folks to go from voting Democrat to Republican to Democrat, the transition was fraught with conflict, and it highlighted complexities of navigating political allegiance and in a racially divided society. So basically what I'm saying, the response of Black folks to those leaders advocating for Democrat Party was harsh and critical. I need 10 more super chats. And it reflected a deep historical awareness of the party's alignment with white supremacy and the urgent need for a genuine progress towards racial equality. And the tensions and divisions that arose from this debate underscored the complexities of the political identity within the Black community during this period. Now, throughout history, Black leaders advocating for a shift towards the Democrat Party during their strong ties with white supremacy, they faced a lot of criticism. And these reactions illustrate the deep complexity of political alignment in the Black community, particularly when the Democrat Party was associated with the segregation race of W.B. Du Bois. He was a key figure in the Black American intellectual circles and political landscape. And he faced substantial criticism and backlash for his support for Franklin Roosevelt during the New Deal era. Marcus Garvey, who remained staunchly opposed to any collaboration with the Democrat Party, accused Du Bois of compromising on racial justice. He basically called him a sellout. Marcus Garvey openly criticized Du Bois and accused him of betrayal for associating with that party that had long oppressed Black people. Can you imagine that? That's like some of these Black Republicans. These Black folks are now associated with Trump and the Republican Party. Call them sellouts. Again, we are talking about an arch. We're talking about a secular art. Are y'all learning something today? Let me know if you're learning something. And many of you all have heard about this public feud between Garvey and Du Bois in the 1930s. And it highlighted the divisions in the Black community, and Du Bois' stance was seen by some as too accommodating to the political party that still upheld many policies of racial discrimination. Even to this day, he's considered a sellout. And he was just saying, vote for the Democratic Party. Think about that. Did y'all know that? Did y'all learn that in your history classes? They didn't teach you that in your Black history class? Huh? Are you learning something? Another person, A. Philip Randolph. He's a prominent labor leader and civil rights activist. And he pushed for Black support of the Democrat Party, particularly in relations to labor rights and economic justice. And he faced opposition from within the Black community, especially from the more militant factions. And critics argue that aligning with a party dominated by these racist Southern Democrats at the time, who were openly hostile to civil rights, would weaken the fight for racial equality. Before the 1941 March on Washington, Randolph received pushback from the civil rights organization, like the NAACP. Nobody liked him. He was concerned that if the Democrats won, there will be insignificant progress in the civil rights movement. Especially considered that the Southern Democrats held significant power in Congress. You understand? Mary McLeod Bethune. She was a great advocate for Black people. She bridged the gap between the Black community and the Democratic Party. She had all of this history of being there in the cut for Black folks. She got criticized by members of the Black community. They said, you a fool. You're not going to change nothing. Even within organizations like the NAACP, which she had close ties with, they criticized her while they criticized her even though she had access to the president. Okay? So what I'm trying to explain to y'all is, and other people like James Weldon Johnson. He was a leader of the NAACP. He advocated for black support for the Democrat Party. He recognized the potential for civil rights progress. His efforts, they were controversial because people in the black community believed the NAACP should remain nonpartisan and feared that if you get too close of an alignment with the Democrats, might compromise the organization's goal. They thought he was being tricked. How you going to align with the people you were just fighting with? The NAACP has spent years and decades fighting against these Dixiecrats, these racist folk, and now you telling us we need to align with you? Stupid. Somebody type you stupid in the chat room. You stupid. You look like a fool. You understand? Can you imagine the pressure that was on these black folks? We've come so far, and you trying to send us back? Oh, hell no. They even had something called the Black Cabinet. And this was an informal group of black folks that were acted as advisors to President Roosevelt. They were both praised and criticized for their limited influence. They basically said, y'all a bunch of, what do they call them? Basically, they said that the grassroots folks, the streets, and the community leaders said these black members, these so-called black cabinet members, they just symbolic. See? That's what they call them, just symbolic. They're just gestures. They're figureheads rather than agents of real change. Miss Bethune was part of Bethune. Mary McLeod Bethune, she was a part of that. They were criticized for being too willing to accept minor concessions from the Roosevelt administration. They wanted them to be more aggressive against racial discrimination. And there was a lot of tension between the moderate political engagement and the demand for immediate action to lead a sharp criticism from the civil rights. Look, here's the thing. It got so bad. You know what happened to W.B. Du Bois after this? He was so disillusioned with both of the parties, he eventually just said, I'm just going to go be a socialist. You see? He ended up criticizing the Democratic Party for failure to do what it said it was going to do. And so he got alienated from the mainstream politics. They used his ass. Didn't I just tell y'all earlier that white supremacy also always breaks its tools? The Democrats used his ass. He had just turned radical. His involvement in the 1951 We Charge a Genocide petition to the United Nations accusing the U.S. government of racial violence, it reflected his growing radicalism. This is what happened to him. They used his ass. So he got played. And I'm going to explain you the problem. Okay? I'm going to give you a hint. What did I tell y'all all the time? Vote your interest. Somebody type that in the chat room. You'll never hear me advocating for the Republican Party or the Democrat Party. I tell you to vote your interest. That's what I tell black men. I tell anybody, vote your interest. Philip A. Randolph. He remained a significant leader in the civil rights movement, but he too became frustrated with the Democratic Party over time. Remember, his reputation was on the line. He organized the 1963 March on Washington And it was a pivotal moment in American history. And he continued to challenge the Democrat Party, particularly President Kennedy, because he didn't fully commit to the racial cause of racial equality. His dumb ass. You understand what I'm saying? What about Mary McLeod Bethune? Her influence within the Democrat Party waned following Roosevelt's death. And by the time Truman administration popped up, she was just on the sideline. And that, if nothing else, highlights the precariousness of political alliances. And her effort to try to keep a seat at the table, it was undermined as the party began to shift. James Weldon Johnson, you see how all these people got used, these black folk got used and disregarded? White supremacy always braces tools. I hope you black conservatives are listening to this. I hope you extremists, you black extremists, conservative extremists are listening to this with both ears. You might need to get the transcript. I need 10 more super chats. Same thing happened to James Weldon Johnson, his isolation. He got isolated. From the political landscape. They had difficulty advancing civil rights within the political system. It was resistant to the reform. And all those people in the black, so-called black cabinet, they found themselves increasingly marginalized. They were no longer necessary. They just needed them to get black people to vote for them. And once that was over, they pimped their credibility out. Black folks didn't believe them anymore. And so guess what happened? It's a wrap. They literally were trying to get black folks to vote for the Democrat Party during the height of its ties to white supremacy. And that reflected internal conflict within the black community. And these leaders were often seen as compromising or betraying the hard-fought gains made under the Republican leadership, which was at that time friendly to black people. And over time, these leaders became disillusioned, marginalized, and they were kicked to the curb. Somebody type "kicked to the curb" in the chat room. Once they got black folks on board, the Democrat Party's priorities changed and shifted. See, this is the consequences of party loyalty. And this is the same mistake that modern black conservatives are making. See, from the perspective of many black people in the black community, modern day black conservative extremists, they're often perceived as sellouts. Somebody type "sellout" in the chat room. Much like the extremist Democrats who promote vote blue no matter who. Both of these groups are seen as advocating party loyalty over the interests of the black community. Somebody type "vote your interest" in the chat room. Just like you have these black Democrats urging unwavering support for the Democrat Party, even when it doesn't serve the black community's best interest, we're viewing them with skepticism. So too are we viewing these black conservatives who align themselves with these extreme right conservative factions. See, the fundamental error, I want y'all to listen to me. The fundamental error lies in prioritizing allegiance to a party over the interest of black voters. This is the same misstep made by those earlier leaders who pushed for support of the Democrat Party without equipping black Americans to vote in alignment with our own needs and interests. When black voters are urged to support a party, whether Democrat or Republican, without a critical assessment of what that party is offering, they become tools in the political machine rather than empowered participants in democracy. Instead of teaching the Black community to analyze policies, platforms, and candidates from a position of strength, these so-called Black leaders are leading us into a trap, the trap of party loyalty. The modern day so-called Black conservative extremists who align themselves with the conservative causes are making the same mistake, just like their predecessors on the Democrat side. And they're going to face the consequences when their usefulness to this political faction has expired. They're forced to return to the community that views them as disconnected, out of touch with the needs. This is what they're going to look for. This is what they have to look forward to. Now, what do I predict? I predict there's going to be a decline in what we call Black conservatism as a thing, okay? Because the end is near, the end of the novelty. The novelty is over, right? I need 10 more super chats, God damn it. 10 for a win. Now, there was a time, if you called yourself a Black Republican or a Black conservative, you can get everybody's pressure up in the room. Tell the truth. Go tell somebody in 2012 you was voting Republican. Go tell them back in 2008 that you were gonna vote for Mitt Romney or something like that. That would run everybody. Boy, you wouldn't get invited to the cookout, would you? That's back when it was a novelty. But with the increasing number of Black folks openly identifying as conservative, that novelty has faded. How many of y'all voting for Trump? If you Black and you voting for Trump, type Black MAGA in the chat room. Somebody type Black MAGA in the chat room. I'm voting for Trump, not because I'm loyal to the Republican Party. I'm voting for Trump because it serves my interest. I'm a small business owner. I'm a homeowner. I'm a father. I want to pay lower taxes. I'm only interested in the money. Somebody type money in the chat room. I know if I vote for Kamala Harris, my taxes are going to go through the roof. I'm voting for Trump. That's it. If you voted for Trump, type Black MAGA in the chat room. You might vote Democrat on the local level, but if you're going to vote for Trump on the national level for the presidency, type Black MAGA in the chat room. Again, I'm not loyal to the Democrat Party. I'm not loyal to the Republican Party. I'm loyal to my interest. If you're going to vote for Donald Trump, type Black MAGA in the chat room. Look at all these people voting Black MAGA. Look at all these people who are typing Black MAGA. They wouldn't dare do this in 2016. You know they would. Y'all know you wouldn't. If you would not have announced that you were voting Republican in 2016, you know, if you knew better, somebody type couldn't do it in the chat room. Somebody type can't do it. If you know you couldn't bring that up at the cookout, you couldn't tell your mom and them and your grandma and them you voted for Donald Trump or the Republicans back in 2016, and that wasn't but 8 years ago. Somebody type can't do it. They're flat. Little popo on them would be flat. Your tires would get sliced. You couldn't do that. But they can do it now. Because being a Black conservative, being a Black Republican is not a novelty anymore. And now, shout out to the folks who gave me 2 more. I need 8 more super chats. Shout out to Man on the Long Walk. Shout out to David Shelton. My man, fellow Cooley said, fellow Californian, grew up in San Bernardino and lived on 2nd Ave and 40. Oh, yeah, you over there in the 40s here. And on Crenshaw, don't agree with everything you say, but I have a lot of respect for you. Keep doing what you do. God bless you home. But yeah, man, shout out to you, baby. Thank you so much. HVAC man, money God damn it, I'm loyal to my, yeah. Somebody type loyal to my interests in the chat room. Hell with these parties. Don't make the same mistake that the people that came before us. You put your interests before your party, not your party before the interest. Now back to what I was saying. Now, praise God, that the black conservatism is more visible. These so-called black conservatives will inevitably face more criticism and in some cases begin to lose popularity. See, the initial intrigue of being a minority voice in conservative circles no longer offers the same protective shield from scrutiny. See, again, I told you guys earlier, the novelty is over. Shout out to my man Carlton Ward. Thank you for that Cash App. I think you're the first one to give me a Cash App, baby. I told y'all earlier, the novelty is over. They can't run you like they can't use you like they used to, black conservatives. And for you black extremist conservatives, it's going to be even harder fall for you. White supremacy always breaks its tools. You got all these black folks voting for Donald Trump. You're unnecessary anymore. They use your ass like they did Mary McLeod Bethune. They use you like they did W.B. Du Bois. They used your ass. And history has shown that white supremacy uses people as tools for its agenda, but eventually discards them when they no longer find them useful. You black conservative extremists, you've said all that heinous, crazy stuff on the internet. Myron Gaines, Candace Owens. You aligned yourself not just with conservative principles, but with the white supremacist rhetoric. And whether you did it for attention, power, or financial gain, you eventually you'll be rejected by those very same groups that you once sought approval. Look at how they're using this boy Myron Gaines as a ping pong. I've been watching O'Shea Duke Jackson every time I wake up and put my little internet on. I put that little O'Shea, what does he say? How does he say? He says O'Shea Duke Jackson, right? And he said, I hate talking about Myron Gaines. He do it every day. This boy, what's Myron Gaines' fresh and fit? What's his real name? Is it like Futumbe or something like Fudu or something like that? Boy, they are whooping his butt all across the white supremacist web YouTube section. They done told him to go home. Them white boys said, go back. This is our country. Go back. And see, if he was a foundational black American, he would know how to answer that question. See, the foundational black Americans understand how to answer the question of go back home. The answer is make me. That's the answer. Make me go back. Because as we know, as our foundational black American brothers know and sisters know, America belongs to who's ever strong enough to take it, number one. Number two, this was never a country for white men. Because when you got here, the red man was here. Then you brought the black man over here with you. And then you brought the Asian man because you're too lazy to do your own damn work. So this was never a country for white men. Matter of fact, if you want all the black folks to leave, first thing we taking is the NBA and the NFL. And so y'all can watch some bored-ass football and basketball. We're going to start with the athletes. And if all the athletes leave, then we know that every white woman worth being with is going to be on the first plane back to Africa. We know that. So what are you talking about? It's just going to be a bunch of white men over here. Cut it out. But see, you got people like Myron Gaines, a doggone immigrant. You have no backbone. when it comes to dealing with white zaddy, and they just punk you and throw you around like a little black ping pong ball. You make the whole set look bad. You're weak out here in these streets, Myron. You need to learn how to be a black man if you're gonna carry that mantle. You're weak out here. You're sorry out here. You talk that big talk to black people. And you stay your butt down there in Miami. You say all that tough talk to foundational black America. And then when the white boys get to whooping on you, you can't make me leave. I'm an American. I was born here. Shut your ass up. Out there looking soft as a cotton swab. And then same thing with this little lady, Candace Owens. This girl. She cute. She's a pretty girl. If you like black women, she's a pretty girl. And that's why she get away with saying some of the stuff she says. She's a pretty little lady. But some of that big talk you talking, you need to go ahead and sit down somewhere, miss. Just go and sit down somewhere. Take you and your rhetoric and go somewhere. They already demonetized that boy Myron Gaines, and they're going to take her little channel too. Keep your little mouth shut. You look like buffoons. You've aligned yourself with the extremists, or align yourselves with the white supremacists, the extremists in their rhetoric. And these same people are now rejecting you because you're no longer a novelty. 5-6 years ago, okay, we needed them. And now that you all are being rejected, you look at Tommy Sotomayor. They talked about him so bad. But the minute he started talking about white folk, guess what happened? White supremacy does not tolerate dissension, even from those who have been its loudest supporters. And once these so-called black conservatives step out of line and are no longer needed, they're going to be cast aside. And you so-called black conservative extremists, you've alienated yourselves from the black community by spewing all this anti-black rhetoric. That harsh criticism and betrayal, you've severed ties with the very people that you hide amongst. And as a result, when you're rejected by that white supremacist group that you've been begging to get into and sought to please, you're not going to find refuge in the black community. You spend too much time and energy undermining the struggles and voices of our people, my people. And you're not going to be accepted back into the fold. Your isolation will be complete, as neither side will welcome you. You're going to be as disillusioned as W.B. Du Bois. Dr. John Henry Clark made a statement. He said, white supremacy always breaks its tool. It underscores the harsh reality that those who aid white supremacy, even from marginalized groups, are ultimately discarded when they're no longer useful. And this concept applies to many of these so-called black leaders who advocated for African Americans to support the Democrat Party way back when, during the time when that party was still influenced heavily by these white supremacist ideologies. And these leaders believed that they were securing progress for their communities, eventually faced abandonment once their utility was diminished. See, these are the harsh realities. I need 7 more super chats. Black leaders who initially supported the Democrat Party were marginalized when their political value diminished. After the major shift in black voting patterns during the mid-20th century, Mary McLeod Bethune, who had been influential with Franklin Roosevelt, nothing. Her influence and support evaporated, and she was perceived as useful. Same thing happened to W.B. Du Bois. He just no longer necessary. He been labeled a sellout for damn, how many decades? Damn near 100 years now. Philip A. Randolph. Diminished influence. Just look at it. And there was many other civil rights leaders like that. They used you and they discarded you. And that's what's going to happen to Myron Gaines and some of these other folks. And these leaders, even the modern day leaders, you're experiencing what Dr. Clark was talking about. Once you have fulfilled the role that they have for you and support their agenda, right? An agenda that did not fully align with the interests of the community, you are discarded. The Democrat Party, it was crucial at certain moments in history. But it didn't provide these leaders with sustained support or recognition after their roles were deemed less necessary. You're dealing with a Republican wing and a Democrat wing, but it's the same racist bird. And so the harsh truth remains that political alliances, when formed without clear focus on genuine community empowerment, often result in abandonment once the larger political system no longer benefits from the relationship. Look, man, it's not about party, it's about interest. It's not about party, it's about interest. Black folks, vote your interest. Vote your interest. I can say that 100 times. Vote your interest. Now, what's the fate of these so-called modern day black conservatives when their usefulness fades? Again, this concept that white supremacy always breaks its tools applies equally to these modern day black conservatives, many of whom have risen to prominence by aligning themselves with these so-called conservative ideologies by advancing the interests of predominantly white conservative figureheads, figures such as Supreme Court Justice Clarence Thomas, Brandon Tate, the Hodge twins, Larry Evans, Jason Whitlock, Alan West, Sheriff David Clark, Stacey Dash. They've championed conservative values. But they did so at the time when these so-called conservative values were directly aligned with racism and racist. And then on the flat out extreme side, you got folks like Tommy Sotomayor, Sneeko, Myron Gaines, Candace Owens, Jesse Lee Peterson. They gained attention from espousing deadly, dangerous anti-black rhetoric that harshly and unfairly criticizes the black community. What do you think this outcome is going to be? We see them. We might vote for Trump, but we still see them as sellouts. They got used. That's what I'm trying to explain to y'all. Do you see the difference? It takes a nuanced approach to understand this. See, as more Black Americans embrace conservatism or conservative principles because they see that it benefits them, these folks that I mentioned, who were once considered rare and novel within conservative spaces, they're going to find that their utility is waning. And historically, when white supremacy no longer needs a certain figure or group to push its agenda, it discards them, just as it did with those earlier Black leaders who aligned with the Democrat Party. These Black conservatives have also positioned themselves as the token voices within the white-dominated spaces, speaking against liberal or progressive movements, whatever. They're celebrated as long as their rhetoric is useful in advancing a broader agenda, but the agenda has been advanced. Look, they got 25, 30% of Black people saying they're going to vote Republican this season. They don't need you y'all black behinds no more. I need 7 more super chats. I need 7 more super chats. I am giving you something you can't get anywhere else. You are not going to get it on this level. Pay me for my time. Now, as black conservatism becomes more visible and more mainstream, these individuals, these folks that I mentioned earlier, your Myron Gaines, your Candace Owens, your Jesse Lee Petersons, and even the milder ones like Larry Elder and Jason Whitlock, they're not as unique. They no longer represent a minority viewpoint. So what do they need them for? Once that novelty fades, this message no longer cares. Their message no longer carries the same weight. And so they're going to get sidelined, just like Mary McLeod Bethune got sidelined. White supremacy, whether it's overt or subtle, does not maintain long-term loyalty to those who've helped it advance its causes, especially when they're no longer politically advantageous. Shout out to Horace Coates. I need 6 more super chats. These so-called black conservative figures will soon find themselves discarded or ignored by the very audiences that once elevated them as their roles become redundant in a larger, more diverse conservative movement. Do you see that? You see what's happening? Ain't nobody gonna tell you the future like Uncle D. I get to whip my little crystal ball out. You saw it happen with the black leaders advocating for the Democrat Party in the mid-20th century. They were ultimately marginalized. And today's black conservatives face the same similar fate. Once they're no longer needed to validate or bolster conservative ideologies, they're going to get discarded. More importantly, and this is the warning, somebody type warning in the chat room. Shout out to my man, Cody Marshall. This is the warning. They spent years criticizing and alienating black folks in the black community. They're going to find it very difficult to return to this community. They are disconnected, and they were complicit in promoting harmful narratives. These same harmful narratives are why black folks get shot and killed. Instead of a Candace Owens and some of these other folks saying, you know what, Trayvon Martin was unjustly murdered, we need to make a stink about it. Instead of us being on the same page, you had these knuckleheads on the other side saying he deserved it. And so that gives ammo to the white supremacist racists, these race soldiers. That's what it does. And I don't know about you, brothers, but I got sons. And I am a black man myself. So when they help set up that environment, when they set that in, when they start justifying that, when these suckers can get cover from folks that look like us, it makes our lives different. That's why you're dangerous. You deserve to be isolated and rejected from the black community. You are unwelcome by the black community. You distance yourself from the black community, and you did it for the money. See, here's the problem with folks like Candace Owens and Myron Gaines, and people like Roland Martin. All 3 of these people are children of immigrants, and they lack a genuine understanding of the nuanced history and the culture of foundational black Americans. Their immigrant backgrounds create a disconnect that allows them to criticize and attack the very community they superficially belong to. Now, I'm gonna exclude Roland Martin because at least Roland Martin, he attacks white supremacy racism. When you got people like Candace Owens, Myron Gaines, and Sneeko, all children of immigrants, they support white supremacy racism in their rhetoric. And I have to believe it's due to their immigrant background, because they don't see themselves as us, they see themselves as other. You see yourselves as other, and so it allows you to criticize and attack the very community that you superficially belong to. Shout out to Marcellus Jones. I need 4 more super chats. Now, they identify as black or African or of African descent, but they don't set to shame historical experiences of systematic oppression, resilience, and cultural heritage that define FBAs. And this lack of understanding gives them a false sense of authority to speak on our issues that they know very little about. And it makes them very convenient spokespeople for the far right agendas that spew that hateful rhetoric. When you got people like Owens and Myron Gaines, they comfortably criticize foundational Black Americans because they don't see themselves as part of the lineage. The immigrant roots, often from the Caribbean or other non-continental U.S. backgrounds, provide them with a cultural buffer, distancing them from the legacy of slavery, Jim Crow, and systematic racism, and the foundational Black Americans that we've had to deal with for generations. They exploit their Black identity while dismissing the rich cultural history that informs foundational Black Americans of our struggle. And this disconnect serves as a broader purpose, allowing them to be wielded by the right-wing movements as voices that seemingly speak from the Black community while actively working against our interests. Here's the thing. Foundational Black Americans have long held certain conservative values. We love our family. We love God. We love our community. And quiet as kept, we love our country too. We are fiscally conservative. We are definitely socially conservative, especially when it comes to some of these rainbow agendas. The only reason that we don't align with the Republican Party or the racist aspect of the party, Democrat or Republican, is because of that racism. And it's our experiences with pervasive racism and exclusion from mainstream conservative spaces, especially the Republican Party recently, is what led to a fraught relationship with conservatism. But for the most part, we are a very conservative people. Somebody type Jesus in the chat room. We love Jesus. And if we don't love Jesus, we love Allah, but we love the Lord. Amen. Now, some people in the foundational Black American community, they still align with conservative values, but they're very wary of a party that has historically ignored or actively worked against the civil rights movement. And this disillusionment has created a deep mistrust of the party. And despite shared values in other areas, we still are like, nah, can't do it. Now, what happens? You got people like Donald Trump. And to me, he's more of a nationalist, nation first, as opposed to party first. And so among a lot of Black people, among a lot of foundational Black Americans, not necessarily for his policies, but due to his long-standing cultural presence and his nationalism, we support him. Think about it. I need 4 more super chats. But think about it. For decades, Trump has been celebrated in certain Black media spaces. Hip hop. He's been the symbol of wealth and success. His image as a business mogul, more so than his politics, have given him credibility amongst some Black Americans who overlooked his harmful policies and some of his rhetoric. And we look recently at what he's been having to deal with. This lawfare situation. And we can identify with that. On top of that, gas was cheaper. Somebody type cheap gas in the chat room. Somebody type cheaper gas in the chat room. And so we like, yeah, we'll vote for him. Now contrast that with Biden and Harris in their administration. Specifically, Joe Biden. We remember Joe Biden's role in the legislation of the 1994 crime bill. He authored that. He was proud of it. He called it the Biden bill. And that 1994 crime bill disproportionately harmed Black communities And so we look at him with skepticism. And look at Kamala Harris's record as a prosecutor. If nothing else, it raises questions about her commitment to addressing systematic racism and criminal justice reform. Dion N., thank you for the $5. I need 3 more super chats. Her history of perceived targeting and betrayal of Black folks specifically creates a very complicated political landscape when it comes to us dealing with her. And so many foundational Black Americans find ourselves questioning whether or not the Democrat Party truly serves their interests despite their liberal messaging. You got the man who single-handedly helped destroy the Black community in the 1980s and 90s by writing the manuscript in the form of the 1994 crime bill, the 1988 crack bill, and there was another one up in that single-handedly targeted and destroyed the Black community. And then you got this prosecutor from San Francisco who may or may not be Black. I don't know what she is, but whatever she is, in her work, at her day job, she set up laws that purposely targeted Black folks. Shout out to Glenn Curtis. Keep doing this thing, my brother. So you want us to vote for them? You tell us that the Democrats are racist, but then we look at you? Come on, man. Huh? Really? You can't play the racism game. Shout out to Glenn Curtis. I need 2 more super chats. Now look at the ignorance displayed by Candace Owens and Myron Gaines. And it's rooted in their detachment from the FBA experience. And it has real world consequences. See, by aligning with the far right movement and attacking foundational Black Americans, they not only alienate themselves from the Black cultural heritage, but they also perpetuate these negative stereotypes. See, their willingness to serve as mouthpieces for anti-Black narratives reflect a disturbing trend where Black folks are used to validate harmful policies, rhetoric, and actions against Black folks, other Black folks, while furthering the agenda of white supremacy. Sega, Sage Talk Media, keep doing, drop. Shout out to you. I need 1 more goddamn super chat. 1 more. Let's go. Now, back to these folk. They co-opted voice presents a false legitimacy to attacks on foundational Black Americans, ultimately working to undermine our historical and ongoing struggle. They're tools. Candace Owens, Myron Gaines, Jesse Lee Peterson, Sneeko. They exemplify the dangers of a profound misunderstanding of foundational Black American culture and history. Their immigrant backgrounds, while a part of their personal identities, have led to a disconnect from the specific historical legacy of FBA. And this disconnect allows them to criticize and undermine the very community that they have been protected by. They're over here because foundational Black American leaders fought for civil rights and allowed for darker people to immigrate to this country. And here they are serving as tools for those who seek to weaken the influence of foundational Black Americans. As FBAs continue to navigate these political cultural identities, we face a challenge of reclaiming the narrative and resisting these divisive forces. The ignorance displayed by Candace Owens and Myron Gaines and their ilk, these Black conservative extremists, it's going to ultimately lead to their downfall. But the question is, how much damage are they going to do to our meaningful political influence? How much damage? See, here's the thing, family. All right, I want you to understand something. Shout out to GCLA. Shout out to Quality Guy, born and raised in Watts. Watts up, baby. on Central and 120th Street, 120. Keep preaching, brother. Much respect. Yeah, baby. Got my hat handy. Look at that. Let me go ahead and put that back. Let me be serious. Now, here's the thing. I done told y'all what's going to happen. I'm going to tell you again. And I hope somebody tags these people on this broadcast. All that goofballing and selling out you're doing over there. See, these folk, Myron Gaines, Candace Owens, Jesse Lee Peterson, they're doing it for the money. But they represent a particularly dangerous phenomenon. Black folks who align with white supremacist ideologies and act as mouthpieces for far-right narratives that criticize black folks and black communities, specifically foundational black. These people, they're seemingly influential now, but they're on the brink of a brutal reality. See, as we increasingly assert our political autonomy and delineate between us and them, they're going to soon have to face some consequences. They are disposable tools. Candace, Myron, Sneeko, Jesse. You're nothing more than temporary tools for the white conservative establishment. You're useful in amplifying harmful narratives that serve your white handlers. But history has shown that figures who act as intermediaries for oppressive systems are ultimately disposable. And once your utility runs out or the political landscape shifts, which it's doing right now, you will be cast aside. White supremacy at its core does not value its tools. It uses them to further its agenda and will discard them without hesitation when they are no longer needed. And as more black folks reject your divisive rhetoric of these conservative extremists like Owens, like Gaines, like Sneeko, like Jesse Lee Peterson, that backlash will swift. It's going to be swift and severe. Black folk are tired of being demeaned and attacked. Let me say that again. Foundational black Americans are growing tired of being demeaned and attacked by you outsiders. We are increasingly viewing you as traitors. Furthermore, your white racist allies will also turn on you once you've served your purpose. And that's going to leave you stranded with nowhere to go. And the eventual ostracism will not only come from the communities that you abandoned, but also from the white supremacist structures that you serve. You're going to be by yourself for the next 40 or 50 years. How old are they? Both of them 30, 40 years old. You can't go nowhere for the next 40 years. You damn sure can't come to the cookout. Where you going to work? Everywhere you go, it's going to be like, we know him. That's her. Somebody type, that's her, that's him in the chat room. Every time if you say anything crazy at your new job, once this YouTube thing is over, you're going to get a racial harassment charge. Where you think those white folks are going to throw you? They're going to throw you right back over here with us. Black folks are becoming politically aware, and we're focused on self-determination. And figures like Owens and Gaines, who have attacked our communities for political gain and monetary gain, we see you as sellouts. Whether you think you're a foundational black American or not, you still black and you in America. And so we see you as selling out our side. And as the political tides shift towards an emphasis on independence and authentic representation, these harsh criticisms that you all have levied They're going to boomerang. It's going to leave you isolated, left out. History is filled with examples of black folks who aligned with the oppressive systems only to be discarded once they were no longer useful. Owens, Mr. Gaines, you have a day of reckoning coming where your divisive and destructive narratives, which have become irrelevant or out of favor, your influence built on attacking black folks, your own people, for short-term political gain, Willie Rowe, leaving you to fend for yourself in a system that no longer values you. The cycle of white supremacy has always been to use and discard people like Candace Owens and Myron Gaines, and they will not escape their fate. Now, as the Republican Party makes more authentic efforts to court black voters, people like Candace Owens and Myron Gaines will quickly find themselves politically irrelevant. You're too extreme. Your extremist views and tactics designed to placate these white supremacist extremists will no longer resonate with a broader, more inclusive Republican agenda, a broader, more inclusive conservative agenda. As the party shifts its approach, these figures will be left behind, seen as relics of a divisive and failed strategy. Their once prominent platforms will diminish as their relevance fades in the eyes of both black folk and white folk, reasonable Americans. Now, what does cultural exile look like? It's the consequences for Owens and Gaines, and they won't just be political. They'll also be cultural. Once black community fully rejects this toxic rhetoric and harm, because there's some of y'all that like to hear that. Let's just keep it one. Y'all are watching her. Y'all are watching him. Y'all like watching that. But even you all who enjoy watching it right now, at some point you're going to get tired of it. It's too extreme. It's like rap music. You used to listen to all that cussing and bumping and loud music, and then you turn 35, 40 years old. You're like, turn that goddamn music down. It's too loud. It's too extreme. You don't want to hear that. You got kids in the back. You mature, don't you? Tell the truth. Shame the devil. Come on now. Y'all know I'm talking to grown folks. This is another one of those grown folks conversation now. Don't run from it. Run to it. I'm giving what you asked for. Hell, give me 3 more super chats. It's too extreme. You're over the top. They're going to be seen as pariahs, stripped of credibility and influence, and this cultural exile will be swift. And their fall from grace will be complete as both the black community and the conservative base distance themselves from this divisive presence. Many of y'all used to like Tommy Sotomayor. Last I checked, this brother's living in a homeless shelter somewhere. His demise was swift. And some of y'all might have liked some of the things he said about black women, but at the end of the day, we knew that shit was over the top. We know that's crazy. Damn, that brother got issues. He got mama issues or something. Damn, he even talked about it. So it wasn't necessarily genuine. He was letting off steam. We get that. But it was too extreme, wasn't it? Come on, tell the truth, man. Too damn extreme. You like listening to it, like gangster rap, selling drugs and weed while you sitting there doing your algebra homework in the 3rd grade. Living a lifestyle that you know you never want to leave. Now you sitting up in your BMW with your 401k, headed down to your 3-story townhouse with your white girlfriend. Talking about, yeah, NWA, UGK for life. Come on now, tell you the truth. You never lived that. It just helped you get your rocks off. People like that, those extreme people. You have a taste for it. You know you like it. Black women like it. Black men like it. You like those extremes. But those people who are purveyors of that extreme rhetoric, they don't last long. See, look, while their alignment with white supremacy, and I'm talking about these extremists, on the black Republican. I'm not talking about the mild-mannered ones. I'm talking about the extreme, because there's some black conservatives listening right now. I ain't talking about you. I'm talking about the ones, if you close your eyes, it sounds like you didn't know what color these people were. It sounds like they had a KKK hood on. Some of the things they say. So this is what we're talking about. The extremists. And they received that momentary pat on the back, their alignment with white supremacy. They had their platforms, they had their attention, but they were destined to become broken tools when they were no longer useful to the political agendas they served. And as black folk continue to reclaim the narrative and reject divisive, harmful rhetoric, people like Myron Gaines, Candace Owens. I said Jesse Owens. Candace Owens, Sneeko, Jesse Lee Peterson, and some of the other ones. And I'm going to tell you, you so-called black conservatives, y'all better watch it. You guys better watch it too. You ones that I mentioned earlier, Officer Brandon Tatum, the Hodge twins, Jason Whitlock, y'all better watch it too. Because some of the rhetoric that you spew is a little bit over the top. Some of the rhetoric you spew is a little bit too extreme. You making problems for the rest of us and yourself, because you got to live in that black skin. No matter how much of that rhetoric you spew, you're still black. And these people that you capping for and caping for still see your black behind as black. Whether you are Jamaican black, Trinidadian black, whether you biracial black, they don't care. Now, and went off and went on a tangent. But let me be clear. Shout out to everybody who contributed to the Super Chat, the Cash App, and the PayPal. We are talking about black conservative extremists are on their way out. And we went from a historical, I explained who they were, I gave you a definition as just because you have conservative values does not mean you're an extremist. Like just because you have liberal values does not mean you're an extremist. I gave you examples. Don't go around the internet saying Uncle D said this and said that. No. I have conservative values. I am voting for Republicans in the national election, but I'm also voting for Democrats in this election, locally especially, because I'm aligned with my interests. I'm going to vote my interest. I'm not saying that everybody who has conservative values or everybody who votes Republican is an extremist. I'm not saying that. And anybody who says I said that, look at the damn thing. Look at the whole video again. These are the people that you all put on my community tab and said that they are known for being conservative, black people. And I listened to some of their work and I'm like, that's not extreme. That's something that your grandma or your grandpa would tell you back in 1980s and 1990s because they had a different value system. That's not extreme. That's just basic, as they say, common sense. However, there's some extreme stuff going on, and I'm telling y'all to watch it. But let me be clear about these so-called black conservative extremists. They pose a direct and grave threat to the progress and the survival of foundational black American people. And who am I talking about? I'm talking about people like Candace Owens. I'm talking about people like Myron Gaines and Jesse Lee Peterson and the rest of these sellouts. They aren't the champions of free thought or independence from the Democrat Party. No, they're nothing more than puppets, willingly dancing to the tune of white supremacy. They've taken on the role of attack dogs for a system that has never cared about black folks. They're using their skin as a shield to promote ideologies that have systematically oppressed our people for centuries. They love to preach about personal responsibility and self-reliance, don't they? Don't they? Don't be fooled. Don't be fooled. They just code. That's just code for blaming foundational Black Americans for the structural racism we've been fighting against since the first slave ship hit these shores. These extremists weaponize their Black identity, pretending to represent us, while in reality, they've sold their souls to the very people who wish to see us fail. Their rhetoric is not criticism. It's full-blown, it's a full-blown assault on the Black community. Every word they utter is laced with the same tired, racist lies that have been used to justify our oppression for generations. And let's call it what it is, dangerous. Somebody type dangerous in the chat room. Somebody type dangerous in the chat room. Dangerous. These extremists provide cover for white conservatives who can point to them and say, see, even Black people agree with us. And this gives them a green light to the systematic attacks on affirmative action, voting rights, police reform policies that would have fought for that we fought for. Things we fought for to survive and thrive in a society that was built to exclude us. While they preach the real issues, we still deal with systematic racism, economic inequality, and generational trauma. And all that is left to fester. All because they want to shift the blame onto us instead of where it belongs. The racist power structures they know they help protect. And these people aren't just misguided, they're dangerous. And they're dangerous twofold. By allying themselves with white supremacy, they help dismantle the very protections that give us a fighting chance in a rigged system. And their toxic narrative pushes the myth that if we just work harder, we succeed. And they conveniently ignore the reality of systematic racism, acting as if centuries of oppression could be overcome if we just pulled ourselves up by our bootstraps, just a little higher. And see, this treason, plain and simple, that's what it is. It's treason. And we must rebuke these so-called Black conservative extremists in the strongest terms possible. Make no mistake, what they're spreading isn't criticism. It's racism disguised as Blackness. Every reasonable, self-respecting Black American who loves this country and loves our people has a duty to denounce this betrayal. These are traitors willing to sell out their own people for a seat at a table of white supremacy, a baby seat at that, a baby chair. And trust me, their time is coming. Once they've served their purpose, they'll be discarded. Just like every other pawn of white supremacy before them. And when they come crawling back to the community that they betrayed, we will not be waiting here with open arms. Their alignment with far-right ideologies that seek to harm the Black community makes them not just misguided, but dangerous. And I'm gonna keep saying that word, dangerous. Their rhetoric is not criticism. It's racism masked in a Black skin. And every Black American has a duty to denounce that toxic narrative, which serves only to undermine the fight for justice, our centuries-long fight for justice and equality. These extremists are nothing but wolves in sheep clothing, and their betrayal of our community, the foundational Black American community, should not be tolerated nor excused. And we have to expose them for who they are. Traitors, traitors, traitors to the very people that has helped uplift them. This is Uncle D. I love you guys. I'm out.
In the Spurling podcast. Hit the like button, subscribe.